Jeremy, we can start the meeting now.
Good evening, everybody. At the start, we will post the APB anthem, and then we'll proceed to be taken over by the CPDC Chairman Christine to introduce the speakers. We will have the APB anthem played now. This is over to you.
We are committed. Since 1988, we stand united. Our loyalty is with integrity to what is best for our community. We are the members of the APB,
serving all who are in our society.
Be they wealthy, be they meek,
What's best for them we'll seek,
standing firm for all that we should be. What's good for banking governance? Learn the rules and give them prominence. Let's make sure of what is truly right. They will be the trusted light. We are the members of the APB, serving all who are in our society.
Onwards to the future,
We do ascend with challenges and tests. We shall contend by building on the strength we uphold. With bad course ethics, we'll be bold. Empowering professionals, we are committed. Since 1988, we stand united. We stand united.
Good evening. Welcome.
Over to President Mr. Rajapaksa. You can give the welcome address.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening. Welcome all participants. Especially we welcome Mr. Naveen Marapan, President Council, and Mr. Salia Vikramasuriya, Commission Member and Acting Director General, Port City Commission, and Council of Advisors, Council of Members, all participants. This is the fourth our CPDC committee event. We have conducted 3 events very successfully. So this is the topic. This time we have selected the very timely, relevant topic. So I think we will have a good, very inspiring, fruitful session for the next 1.5 hours. So actually government created a regional business hub with high quality public spaces and infrastructure facilities to create a tourism hub with attractions such as shopping, culture and entertainment in the port city special economic zone. So with already the government has done a legal requirements, and it was known one major investment has been done, nearly $1 billion for mixed development project. And this is the future hub of the in Sri Lanka for commerce, tourism, and culture, and especially in South Asia. And also the port city has promised to give high quality urban environment and for residents and visitors. So I think the detailed discussion will have a good discussion in future. I think especially I would like to thank for the CPDC committee chairman and committee members, especially Christine, Jeremy, Anjali, for their effort to conduct this webinar very successfully. I hand over to Mr. Jeremy, Senior Vice President, CPDC Committee, for further discussion.
Thank you, President. I would now invite our CPDC Chairman, Ms. Christine, to introduce our key speakers. Over to you, Christine. Your mic is mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, correct.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening to everybody. We are yet going to start another topic, another webinar on, as our president said, a timely topic, Port City Special Economic Zone, overview and the objectives. We will be touching upon on the new developments, the legislation, benefits with regard to the economic zone of the Port City. So let me introduce our eminent panel, eminent resource personnel for today's lecture. Well, I will introduce both of them together without interrupting in between for the session. So let me introduce the resource personnel, Mr. Naveen Marapana. I don't think anybody needs any introduction about him, but nevertheless, for the sake of the audience, let me introduce him formally. Mr. Naveen Marapana is the President's Counsel. He has over 20 years of experience in litigation before the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, High Courts, and District Courts as lead counsel. Having started his career with emphasis on civil and commercial litigation, both in the original and appellate courts, he has expanded his legal practice to public law, including criminal, constitutional, and administrative law. At present, he is appearing in a number of high-profile white-collar crime cases in Sri Lanka. He has also appeared in almost every leading constitutional law case heard before the Supreme Court during the past 5 years, namely special determinations over bills presented in Parliament, matters concerning the consultative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court over constitutional law issues, and fundamental rights applications concerning the sovereignty and franchise of the people. He was part of the legal teams that successfully opposed the challenge before the Court of Appeal of the citizenship of the current president of Sri Lanka. He also has successfully opposed the recent challenge before the Supreme Court of the dissolution of Parliament by the president. He is part of the legal team presently handling the defense in what is considered to be the largest white-collar crime, namely widely named as bond scam. So he has also appeared in a number of commercial arbitrations, has a portfolio of corporate clients and state agencies who seek his legal opinion and advice on commercial contracts and transactions, and has appeared in multiple sports law and anti-doping law related inquiries. He holds an LLB from King's College London and is the barrister at law of the prestigious Lincoln's Inn. He is member of the Special Experts Committee appointed by His Excellency the President of Sri Lanka to draft the new constitution. And he is also a member of the Sri Lanka Law Commission. He heads the subcommittee tasked with the digitization and court automation of the entire judicial system in Sri Lanka. So I no wonder he is an eminent panel to address the topic. And let me introduce the next personality, who is also a well-known personality relevant to this subject. He is none other than Mr. Saliya Wickramasuriya. Mr. Vikramasuriya joined the oil and gas industry in 1984, working for Schlumberger, the world's largest petroleum services company headquartered in US. Following 20 years of experience in oil exploration worldwide, he returned to Sri Lanka in 2004 and was appointed as the Chairman, Director General of the BOI. He was then appointed as the Chairman of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. He served there from 2006 to 2009. After that, he spent another 3 years overseas in the oil and gas sector. Returning back to Sri Lanka in 2011, he served as the Director General of Petroleum Resources Development Secretariat for 6 years. Currently, Mr. Vikramasuriya serves in number of capacities. He is the co-chair of the National Agenda Committee on Energy of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, a cabinet-appointed consultant to the Ministry of Energy, and he is a member of the Colombo Port City Economic Commission. Currently, he serves as the Acting Director General of the Commission. So I don't think we can get better personnel than this to address today's topic. So I am privileged and humbled to introduce you to eminent personalities, sir. So it's over to you. Thank you.
Mr. Vikramasuriya, we invite you to have an overview discussion of your thoughts on this important project for Sri Lanka. And after that, we could have Naveen to give out a broad explanation of how this came about and the legal implications and how the business can be continued in this new Port City economic zone. Over to you, Mr. Vikramasuriya. Your mic is mute, Mr. Vikramasuriya.
Apologies. Thank you. Allow me to express on behalf of the Commission, the Chairman and the Commission members, my sincere appreciation of the interest displayed in the project by the Association of Professional Bankers. And we welcome this interaction. We hope it will be useful to you in gaining a little bit more understanding of the opportunities that lie before us. Before I get into describing the project very much, I would like to explain to those of you who may or may not be aware that the project itself is a planned city. In other words, it has already been defined in terms of theme and district, precinct, what kind of buildings should be there, what kind of things should happen in there. So it's actually awaiting investment to fulfill the objectives of that project. So in amongst that city, there are some strategic projects that will impact very early on the success of this project. You have seen outside the Gold Face Hotel, you've seen the marina, of course, so opposite the Presidential Secretariat. Some of the strategic components include a convention center. They include an international hospital, international school, and so on and so forth. So it's a huge development, a huge piece of real estate that we have added to the district of Colombo. But His Excellency the President didn't appoint 7 people to a commission to sell plots of land. From his point of view and our point of view, that job is ably performed and can be performed by the project company, who are experts in development and experts in real estate and property. What is expected of the commission and its members is something a little bit more than that. The primary objective of the commission, and in fact, the direction in which all of its efforts are being aimed at this point, is catalyzing significant and complete economic transformation. Now, how does it do that? How does it transform economically the prospects of Sri Lanka? It does that by utilizing a piece of legislation that gives it the authority to exercise within its jurisdiction a regulatory sandbox. In other words, laws can be drafted and drawn up and changed as required to ensure that the sectors governed by those rules actually succeeds in achieving their objectives. So in fact, the Commission's role is to make sure that the project is an economic success and not just selling plots of predefined land for different purposes. Let me share with you a little bit about, now I'm supported by eminent legal counsel and professional banking experience. We've got project company development experience in the form of Tulsi, who's assistant GM of the project. I'm not going to I'm going to stick to the things that I can share with you that are within my sphere of knowledge. So how do we propose to do this economic transformation? It is by unlocking financial value. Financial value is intrinsic, but the manner in which it is accessed and unlocked is greatly dependent on the environment in which it is being transacted. So, in other words, every stakeholder in the port city, be it the government, be it the project company, be it the investor, the resident, the business owner, all of these people, all of this community, if you like, the port city community, must derive optimum economic value from their investment in or interest in the port city project. So all of the initiatives we have launched are aimed in that direction. Now, for example, every experience that we have outside of the port city, in other words, if we go into town and we do anything, opening a bank account is a good example, or importing a product, buying something, exporting something, any of our transactions, filing tax returns, any of our transactions have varying degrees of pain outside. And that pain, in terms of process or bureaucracy or sheer inefficiency, speed of government action, all of these things take their toll on financial value. So unless the environment of doing business is streamlined and swift and decisive and transparent, there's financial value that's been lost in the whole process. So one of our objectives is to declutter this process, both in the execution of it, as well as in the administration of it. I'll explain a little bit more what that means. We have, for example, the land that is available now. I shared with you there are 74 blocks of land at this stage. There's nothing built, so these are primary development opportunities for major property developers. The standard procedure there would be to show it to somebody and give them a price and have them walk through the various different processes involved in acquiring property. And anybody amongst you who has recently gone through the process of either buying or selling property in Sri Lanka, forming companies, you know that it's not easy. So none of this is expected to impinge on the lives of port city residents in the future, and starting with the primary developers of the present. So what we've done as a simple example of making this process streamlined is we have formed shell companies, which we are keeping on a shelf, which have been pre-registered under the Act as offshore companies, or well, there is a process that the investor themselves have to complete, but they are available with all the rules, regulations applicable, and clearances, environment clearances, all of the things that are statutory requirements of that particular plot for that particular use, be it a retail use, a commercial use, a residential use. But these have been created. So from that standpoint of view, the investor simply needs to deposit the money in the bank account and take ownership of the development opportunity. So the things like this, everything that moves, that flows down from there has been made easy. Now, also we mentioned that there is nothing there. You've seen it, you pass it, most of you pass it every day. So we don't want to wait until such time as there is physical development to start commercial and economic activity. This should be of interest to those of you in the banking sector, because obviously financial activity precedes any form of development. So we have the concepts that have been created now of e-residence and e-business. So in other words, very soon, once His Excellency the President has approved the concept, we will be launching a platform by which people can participate in the port city community, even from overseas. They can participate in the port city community even from within Sri Lanka as business owners or as residents. that will come with certain benefits and certain privileges and certain costs. Now, those we will talk about in more detail, perhaps during the Q&A, but one of the fundamental, if you like, catalysts or demand drivers is to make transactions address the needs of the day. Now, the needs of the day, as you're all aware, are liquidity in the form of US dollars and reserves also in the form of US dollars. Liquidity in different currencies, of course, predominantly US dollars. But since our reserves are denominated in dollars, we are having these problems right now that you're all well aware of. So from that point of view, we're focusing our initial initiatives to streamline cash inflows by virtual membership of an e-resident community, which entail particular individuals who get registered in the manner that I'm sure Naveen will touch on. They then get entitled to, for every X number of dollars that they remit into the country, into a holding system within the banking system, they will have a percentage of that held as a duty-free allowance. So when that accumulates, that duty-free allowance can be spent on any number of things. So we are expecting Sri Lanka to very rapidly create a much more transactional destination, if you like, not just for Sri Lankans, expatriate Sri Lankans, migrant workers, diaspora, and tourists who have the capability, the permission, the approval to actually use duty-free allowances. So we are planning to leverage the duty-free allowance that we currently enjoy, which is very small and very limited and abused a lot, into something expanded and much more transparent and much more utilizable. So we expect that economic activity to cascade right down the retail chain. So these are just two simple examples of the approach we are taking. Fundamentally, as I wind up my introduction, the theme of the commission is to ensure that stakeholder experience in their entire chain of interaction from with the port city authorities, if you like, ranging from inquiry to execution of project, has to be a world-class experience for which we are ourselves gearing up with the right systems and processes. I think that's my 10 minutes. So thank you very much. I'm going to stick around for question and answers as they come along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wickramasuriya, for that opening remark and explanation on how this project will do. Now I invite Naveen, who can give a broader perspective on terms of the legality and how the formation takes place and how the business would be generated going forward. Over to you, Naveen, for your discussion.
Thank you, Jeremy. First of all, thank you for having me and this opportunity. The port city is governed by the Colombo Port City Economic Commission Act that has 76 sections. So if I go to talk about all 76 sections at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday working day afternoon, evening, I don't think it'll make for a very entertaining half an hour. So what I propose to do is I'll give a broad overview and I'll also discuss some of the questions that Jeremy shared with me before the start of this, some of the questions raised by the membership. Now, let me begin by clearing up one of the most primary legal misconceptions people seem to have. The Colombo Port City Economic Zone is not a Chinese colony. It does not belong to the government of China, and Sri Lankans don't need passports or visas to access it. Even today, people still have a misconception as to the exact status of this plot of land. Let me clear that legal obstacle first and foremost. It is part of the sovereign territory of Sri Lanka. Basically, it is owned by the government of Sri Lanka. It is subject to Sri Lankan law, and we as citizens can move in there freely. And the background to how this came about and why there are so many misconceptions. I mean, during the Port City Economic Bill Challenge, there were so many misconceptions. I mean, some people went to the effect of making it into like something like a James Bond movie where all the buildings suddenly move apart and the Chinese ballistic missiles come out of the ground. So let me put that to rest once and for all. How this project came about was the Chinese company that's doing the development made a bid and made an offer to the government that they will undertake reclaiming this area of land on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka. After much negotiation, how that deal was structured was that they would do the reclamation at their cost. So it is not a cost to the Sri Lankan government. And the Sri Lankan government would own the entirety of the land. However, as a return on investment or to enable the developer project company to recover the money they have spent on the reclamation, out of the 74 blocks that are there, 46 have been given on a 99-year lease to the Chinese company to market and develop and make money from. So after this lease period ends, that property also reverts back, the leasehold rights end, and it rests back to the government. So there is no question, and if anyone had any misconception that this is some big Chinese conspiracy, I think they're sadly mistaken. It is not. Now, the affairs of the port city is governed by this recent piece of legislation, Act number 11 of 2021. If I can use a banking analogy to give how this act is structured and the concept behind the Port City Commission, think of it as the private banking arm of one of your banks. Now, what is the aim of your private banking outfit? That is, you are trying to attract high net worth entities and individuals to come and bank with you. In order to entice them, you set up this different concept called private banking, where people who can avail themselves of that service are given faster service, better service, tailored benefits, which a normal customer would not get. And in doing that, you are trying to convince that person to come and say, hang on, I really like this place. I really like to work with you guys. So I'm going to park all my money here. Well, in a nutshell, the Port City concept is that. So as in a bank, now say the private, if you go into a branch and you have the private banking section on one side and the normal banking section on the other, the front end is quite different. The experience a customer gets who walks to the private banking section is vastly different to that of someone who goes and stands in the queue in the normal area. But the back office work is identical. So the act is also structured that way. For example, if you want to get a building permit or if you want to run a business, you have to get the regulatory approvals that any other business would have to get in Sri Lanka. But rather than make an investor go to those places individually, the Port City Act creates the commission and makes that commission the single window facilitator. So an investor need not go anywhere else, like going to your relationship banker. The investor deals with the commission. The investor goes to the commission and says, I want to start a business in Sri Lanka. I want to come to the Port City. What do you offer me? What have you got for me? So the front end, that is the investor relation in terms of the act, is the commission. The commission is the single regulator. The commission will then look at the proposal and internally they will figure out, okay, this investor or business needs 15 approvals from various government entities. Unlike normally, where the investor will have to go from door to door to those 15 places, the commission takes that responsibility, clears all the approvals, and the commission issues one license containing all the applicable regulations to the investor. So that is the entire theme of how this act is structured. And if anyone can read it, I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence by going through it section by section, but that is the general structure of the act. Now, to work in the Port City, you need to have, to become the two magic words is you have to become an authorized person. Whether you're Rolex selling watches there, or Microsoft doing business there, or Alaric selling ice cream in the marina, you need to get the status of an authorized person. That is the starting point for any kind of commercial activity in the Port City. So how you do it, the investor makes an application saying, please make me an authorized person. Then the act has a methodology and a procedure of how a person becomes an authorized person. And thereafter, he or she or it is given a license to conduct business in the port city. So that is the general structure of the act. So you apply, you become registered as an authorized person. All the regulatory work is done by the commission. They do the back-end work. They speak to all the government entities, and the act gives them wide powers to get the government entities to work faster, give approvals faster, have a dedicated officer in those government entities, a senior officer who can deal with port city activities. For example, if you go to the register of companies, the Port City Act says commission can write to the registrar and say allocate a very senior officer to deal with port city work. So overall, as Alia very correctly said, the aim is to optimize value and streamline services. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how are we going to make, how is the legislation going to make? Right now, it's literally a sandbox, figuratively and in reality also it's a sandbox. How do you convert it and monetize it? Now, if you look at special economic zones, 6 years ago, there were only 1,000 in the whole world. In 5 years, that has multiplied to 5,500. So there is a huge shift in various countries. In 147 countries, there are 5,500 special economic zones competing for foreign investment. So the port city is entering an extremely competitive, tough market, especially in the post-pandemic era. So as bankers or as people interested in working here, it is an exciting time, because we have to, unless we as a nation and as bankers, as lawyers, as professionals, change and up our game, the port city will not become a success. Now, the way it is structured and the way the special economic zones work, the Colombo port city will either be a spectacular success or it will be just a dismal failure. I don't think there is a halfway point. So with the aim of the commission is, they are very positive. They want to make it world class. So in the next 10 to 15 years, you as bankers will see Fortune 500 companies coming in. They'll be doing business in the port city. You will face stiff competition from the best banks in the world, because they will come and set up businesses here. At the same time, high net worth individuals will come to live here. They will have their holiday homes, they will have their regional apartments or whatever they'll have there. So it is a very exciting time. Now, one of the questions that was asked was, when it comes to banking, who is going to be the regulator? You can rest assured, as a rule of thumb, in any activity in the port city, the normal regulations in the country will apply. However, the commission can give, there are 13 acts in which exemptions can be given, and apart from that, the normal monetary laws or monetary policies, the monetary board will have the regulatory framework. So if you are going as a bank interested in going to the port city, Section 8 of the Act deals with what an offshore banking facility needs. So that's the general structure of the Act, and that I discussed how an authorized person will be given the status of an authorized person. The next question that was asked by Jeremy was, how will this help Sri Lanka in the Doing Business Index? How will these laws and how will the Port City Act help Sri Lanka, which is pretty low in the Doing Business Index, improve? Well, I can think of 3 examples. The first example would be that this Port City Act introduces the concept of a single window facilitator. Now, if you look at the Doing Business Index, the criteria that a country is marked on: ease of setting up a business, the regulatory framework, renting space, all that is marked. So having a single window facilitator who you can go to and get all your regulatory systems requirements met will help Sri Lanka in the doing business index. But actually, I heard that the World Bank has stopped the doing business index because there was corruption within the people doing the marking, and they have been marking certain countries preferentially. But be that as it may, the single window concept will help Sri Lanka do better. The second is, if any of you, any of you has gone and given evidence in a case or taken part in litigation for a bank, you know how bad and how time consuming our legal system can be. Sometimes it is a nightmare. So for a business, if you are going to get Microsoft or Apple to set up a regional office here, you can't tell them, hang on, on average, a money recovery case will take 6 to 8 years. To enforce a contract, it will take about minimum of 5 years. And a land case will take a lifetime. So the Act makes provision for that. The Act says that the Commission has to set up a world-class arbitration center in the port city. So, and any dispute with an authorized person and the Commission, or the Commission and an employee, or inter se between authorized persons, has to go to arbitration. So there is no question of going to prolong litigation. You have to go to arbitration, and the port city is going to be an international arbitration hub. Actually, it is going to compete with jurisdictions like Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia for arbitration business, even outside the port city work per se. So that will help improve the doing business index. Next, if you have to go to a Sri Lankan court, the Commission Act makes a very specific provision that you can fast track litigation. So there are very strict things like day-to-day hearings, no postponements. So to ensure that if anything comes out of the port city jurisdiction, that piece of litigation will be moved along fast, and it will really be fast-tracked and work within an extremely short period of time. So I think these three elements will, to answer the question that was shared with me, will go a long way in making the port city competitive amongst the 5,500 SEZs around the world, and make it attractive for people to come and invest. The other question that is commonly asked is, does this litigation, this legislation, permit the party to enjoy the benefits of an authorized person, but work outside the limits of the port city? Now, right now, there are no buildings there. But if, for example, Apple wants to come and set up a regional office here, or Rolex wants to set up their global Asia headquarters here, there are no buildings for them to occupy. The Act makes provision and gives permission for 5 years that an authorized person, until such time there is space in the port city for them to move, can get a permission from the Commission and set up their businesses outside the port city limits for a limited period of time. So that means businesses can start even without the buildings being there. And that will help populate. There are so many developments coming up in Sri Lanka now. So this kind of thing will help populate those apartments, the office space that is available, until such time the port city has come up. That makes special provision for that. The next thing that as bankers you would probably be interested in is, I personally feel the moment the port city starts taking off and global banks want to come and set up a presence here, all the banks in Sri Lanka would lose the 20% of their best employees overnight. That is going to happen because they will definitely poach them and make them work in the port city. So as bankers, as maybe on the HR side of it, you will have to be ready for that, because you're going to lose the base. They are going to pay everybody double or triple what they earn now and take them to work there. They will earn in foreign exchange. and it will be tax-free. So if you're a good banker, it's going to be exciting times in the coming years. There'll be a lot of opportunities. And banks in Sri Lanka will also have to be ready for an outflow of their talented, the top employees that they have. The next question that was asked was, how should the banking sector maximize their skills, or would they need to have a technological or a skill set change to work in the port city? Well, there is no, in terms of banking, apart from the regulatory aspects of it, there is no big difference in the banking work you do. Of course, access what an offshore bank can do. However, I mean, it is common sense that as Sri Lankans, we get away with a lot of lethargy, so to speak. It's an island mentality because we don't have that much competition. I mean, lawyers are no different. We are all, guilty of this. But for example, if you go to a bank to take a housing loan and you ask the loan,
Naveen, you're muted.
sorry, as I was saying, if a normal person goes to a bank to get a loan, the first day they say bring 10 documents and come. Then when you bring those 10 documents, someone else will say, no, I needed one more. So, I mean, this happens in every sector in Sri Lanka. So when the port city takes off and we have world-class outfits, there the level of competition will be so high that unless we all collectively up our game and learn to make processes, regulations, the legal aspects, the form filling as streamlined as possible, we will just be left behind. Because the port city has tremendous possibilities, and unless you step up your game as bankers, lawyers, or professionals who intend to work there, it will become a big problem. Then the other aspect that Salia touched on very briefly is a very interesting concept. That is the virtual port city concept. So the port city law does not require that you have to be an authorized person. There has to be a physical presence. So for example, you can have a virtual bank where you don't have physical infrastructure. You can be registered as an authorized person. You can be registered to do business in the port city, but it is entirely virtual. So those opportunities are going to open up, and Sri Lankan banks have to be alert enough to make use of that opportunity so that the first mover advantages are there for them. So all in all, I think that's the general structure of the Port City Act. If there's anything else I can deal with, I think my 30 minutes are almost up. So that's the pretty much the overall concept behind the act and how it works. The one more thing I would like to tell you, the act contemplates 3 basic entities. That is the project company that is doing the physical development work, the reclamation work. The Port City Commission, which is the overall regulatory authority, basically, which has regulatory supervision of all the activities that take place there. And there is another entity called the Estate Management Company. That is like the management company in a block of apartments. So when the port city is up and running, the estate manager will be the role of the municipality. It will tell where you can walk your dog, where you can't walk your dog, the parking, zoning, all those requirements. So those are the 3 basic entities in the act. And I think even a very brief glance of the rest of the act will make it very clear to everybody. So I think I've touched on most of it, and I think in the Q&A, if anyone has any specific questions, we can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen, for quite an elaborative explanation of the overview of the operations that it will take. So we are coming to the Q&A session. Joining us for the Q&A session, we have Mr. Tulsi Aluvihare, the Assistant Managing Director of China Harbour Port City and a member of the Colombo International Financial Center Steering Committee. And he's also on the committee of the Special Port City Project. And also we have Revan Vikramasuriya, the Financial Controller consultant for the Port City Project, as well as he has been an experienced banker in the past. So he would be also able to elaborate on new ideas of how target markets for banking can. So I would like to first place the first question to Mr. Saleh Vikramasuriya. Mr. Vikramasuriya, now you are also sometime part of the BOI chairman. Now, when companies come into the BOI for investments, could they also have an opportunity to come into the Port City, or is it a separate path that they will have to go through with the Port City Commission, or they will have a direct access? How does that will operate? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, Jeremy, thank you for the question. The companies that would most likely in the future be approaching the BOI instead of the Port City would be those manufacturing companies, essentially importing, manufacturing, value adding and exporting, more on the manufacturing side and the production side than the services side. The Port City conceptually is a services / trade / financial commercial hub. The Port City regulations with regards to fiscal incentives are also different, more aligned to the requirements of the sectors it caters to. So if somebody wants to set up a large factory, the chances are that they would go to the BOI. But if somebody wants to set up a large headquarters, as Naveen mentioned, then the chances are that they would talk to the Port Commission. I hope that helps.
Yes. Another area I think is now the allocation. Now you also mentioned that there are 74 blocks of land which have been allocated. Now, what in this allocation, is there specific types of projects that will come up, or is it a general service type of what sort of projects? Is it allocated separately for housing, separately for hotels? How is that sort of allocation, demarcation of the 269 hectares, I suppose, are there?
So the answer is yes, they are allocated for, they're very purposed. They're specifically aligned to business, not business, but either retail, commercial, leisure, specific activity. They are activity themed and they are quite well defined. Now that allows me to bring up something that you may have heard in discussions on the Port City before. Why hasn't the Port City optimized its available land for development in terms of construction density? The answer to that is there are restrictions on height, restrictions on coverage, restrictions on gross floor area that are in line with the theme. There's a mix of cultural theme and business purpose covering all the plots of the Port City, right down to the waterfront. There are just villas. Right towards the back of the project, there are towering skyscrapers. And from the skyscrapers to the villas, nobody should block each other's view. So it isn't a question of a Hong Kong where you have large, high density columns standing next to each other from end to end. So the answer to the question you asked is yes. Very specifically, each block has a purpose.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Vikramasuriya. I would like to pose a question to Tulsi. I think Tulsi has been also on one of our APB forums previously. Now, in terms of the technology, now most of the institutions that we would expect as investors are going to bring in new technology or new innovative type of creations in this area. So now in catering to that, in terms of our Sri Lankans, those who are going to be employed or are employable, especially the younger generation who would take up employment in another 2 to 3 years. What sort of a message you can give for their skills development? Because this would be one area, because if you see in our university infrastructure, we do not have that still catering to the new entrepreneurial type of thinking. So how would you bring some thoughts on that so that they can prepare the young bankers who are listening themselves for the future?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Jeremy, for that question. Hi, good evening, everybody. I can give you two answers to that, Jeremy. The long and the most difficult response to comprehend that, we need to really, obviously, and we understand that our education system from primary, secondary, university is not really catered to the demands of an ever-changing environment. So we understand there's a huge gap. However, saying that with private education plus some of the state-owned institutions, especially in the IT sector, producing very competent talent, of which again close to 25-30% goes overseas for better opportunity. The idea about port cities, we think that once we have world-class, large multinational big brands coming and setting up there, we might be able to arrest the brain drain to somewhat. In terms of upping your talent, I think Naveen gave very good examples that you need to be competitive. We have, Port City has signed an MOU with SLASCOM, the IT chambers of Sri Lanka. And with that MOU, we plan to do two things. One is to try and really entice some of the global brands to use Port City Colombo as a destination. Second is to upskill the talent. So I don't know whether you are aware, recently SLASCOM just unveiled an academy to kind of upskill that talent, and there is enough opportunity there. And probably Salia might be able to also comment on this separately from the government side. We are in touch with the Ministry of Skills Development. And we have given now obviously Port City is a 20-year project. We have given the skills requirement for some of the sectors we expect. Some of the sectors will take a lead in the next 5 years. So obviously we hope that the government will also embark on some of these initiatives to ensure that the local workforce is ready for what is being demanded at the Colombo Port City.
Right. Thank you. One more question, Sali or Naveen may be able to give us an overview on this. Now, in terms of startup operations, now there would be Sri Lankan companies who are also starting up new enterprises or to develop new products or services or whatever. So in such instances, how would they have access, or how in the Port City Act or Commission, is there some sort of a way that would give Sri Lankan entrepreneurs opportunity to experience something new within this area and contribute to the country development?
Yes, actually, the Act does not, I think, say that you have to have a Sri Lankan preference. But this is probably the most exciting business prospect Sri Lanka has ever seen. So the Commission will do anything and everything to assist the Sri Lankan entrepreneur to do well in the Port City. I mean, there is no question about that. I mean, that's what the Commission is there for, because unless you have Sri Lankans taking ownership of the Port City, it's like a franchise. You know, the Indian Premier League Cricket League is so successful because you have Indian companies who take ownership, and there is a community base. As a Mumbai Indians love their team. The Sri Lankan LPL failed because all the owners are foreign. So it is inherently essential that Sri Lankan companies see this as an opportunity, that they are welcome and that they're treated really well. So I think there is no question about it. I think everyone would love to see Sri Lankan startups coming to the port city, doing wonderful things, doing new products. And the commission is there. I mean, we have to break our mindset of complicating everything. And I mean, as I always say, we build beautiful buildings. And even your banks, there will be 5-6 entrances and exits to those banks. But if there are 4 entrances, 3.5 are always closed. That's our mentality. I mean, that's sad, but it's true. We want to complicate things. If you go to a car park, there will be 10 slots that are blocked off, that you can't park. It's utterly frustrating. So the port city is not going to be that. So if any Sri Lankan startup or a young banker wants to start a virtual bank, by all means go for it. And it's going to be fresh. It's going to be, everyone's going to be excited. And I think the commission will do their utmost to make it work.
So
Naveen,
when
may
it
I add
comes-
to that, please?
Yes.
No, it's just that I think I completely agree with what Naveen says. At the same time, the commission will be not, well, at the moment, it doesn't envisage taking any anti-competitive measures. In other words, it doesn't, and Naveen touched on this, exclude certain services. So in fact, it encourages internationalization of Sri Lankan companies and Sri Lankan experiences by permitting knowledge transfer between experienced professionals from overseas and Sri Lankan professionals as well. So we are going to encourage a mix, and we're going to make sure that Sri Lanka as a country benefits from the exposure that they obtain from their interaction with potentially competitive foreign parties in the port city. I hope that makes sense.
Correct. Thank you. One more thing, Naveen, now in terms of when customers are going to open accounts, as you said, the regulator will remain the central bank. Now we have also the KYC and the AML laws that are going to apply in there. Now most of these, because Mr. Vikram Surya touched up that there will be e-business registrations and things. So now the KYC factor, which may have to be done electronically and validated. In the commission laws or sections, are there some protection that the banks have, or is it general regulation that the Banking Act would give that will protect the bank? How does it work and in a legal per se?
No, there is nothing in the Commission Act that will do that, but the Monetary Board and the normal anti-money laundering, terrorism funding, KYC requirements will be there, because there was an allegation, I mean, during the bill challenge to the port city, that this is going to be a a money laundering paradise, and there will be people bringing drugs by boatloads. They made it sound like these Cuban Pablo Escobars are going to be sunning themselves on the beach, smoking cigars while they are doing a drug business and money laundering business. This is not going to be that. It's going to be very tightly regulated. But the concept and the theme is, it is going to be regulated without making it cumbersome. So you will have world-class, if you don't have world-class anti-money laundering processes and protocols, you can't get Fortune 500 companies. And the port city wants Fortune 500 companies. We don't, I mean, we have one golf face. What do you get there? You get Odell there. I mean, we don't want that. We want all the big brands. We want the Rolexes, the Patek Philippe, the best designers. So you can't get them if you don't have KYC protocol. They are not going to come to some dodgy island somewhere where everyone has a reputation money laundering. So that won't happen. But the normal regulations will be there. But everything will be streamlined so that you won't have to fill in 1,000 forms and give your horoscope and your wife's horoscope and your probably a dog's horoscope to open an account. But everything will be there and everything will be in place.
Yes. Yes. The area is that about how the tax regulation would come into effect for the projects that are being Sri Lankan companies that would join in this project. How would it is a tax regulation or in the commission?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jeremy. The Act has 3 schedules. Schedule 2, there are 13 statutes where a company can get exemptions from. So, for example, Indian Revenue Act, you can make it completely tax-free. Then the value-added tax. So, the 13 sections, the statutes that are in Schedule 2, if the project has enough strategic importance, That is, if we really want it to happen, if Sri Lanka wants it to happen, if the Commission wants it to happen, you can give tremendous tax benefits. Because unless and until you give a good concession structure, you won't get good companies. But one of the reasons that SCCs have failed across the world is that they try to overcompensate. And they give companies unrealistic tax benefits that moment the benefit is taken out, the company can't sustain itself. So I don't think the port city wants such companies. The port city wants big time players, serious players who will come for a good tax benefit, but will also come for the environment and the regulatory environment around it. So the schedule 2 is what bank would need to see, and that has all the statutes from which exemptions can be given.
Thank you, Naveen. Also now the companies that register in the port city, are there possibilities in listing out in our Colombo Stock Exchange, or companies listed in the stock exchange going vice versa to port city in the commission? Is there any separate section or any area that would can be discussed, or some thoughts can be shared?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea. It's a very good question. But the port city itself will have various exchanges like commodity exchanges and currency exchanges. But whether a port city company can be listed in the Sri Lankan stock exchange, I don't see why not. I mean, if foreign companies can be listed in the New York Stock Exchange, there is no bar to a Sri Lanka port city company being listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. But to give you a definitive answer, I don't know. But but there's nothing in that which prevents it. Okay, right. Thank you. Any thoughts on
Jeremy?
Yeah.
Jeremy, this is Revan. If I can come in there, just
please, yes.
Yeah, if I can add to that point, the Colombo Stock Exchange has passed in the process of implementing a new board, right? So if you go into the rules and regulations and the governance protocols there, which is going to attract and promote offshore companies listing securities on that board. Those securities would be denominated in foreign currency. And given that the port city companies or entities established within the port city would be considered offshore entities, right? There would not be any restrictions in going and listing on the stock on this board the stock exchange is about to launch. And as Naveen alluded to, there are opportunities for entities of their, should they choose, to establish exchanges in the port city zone itself. So the Colombo Stock Exchange could, for example, make a request to establish a separate exchange within the port city special economic zone as well.
Thank you, Revan. Tulsi, one area that was much talked some time back was the China initiative on the Belt and Road initiatives. So any thoughts that you could share on this, how it will benefit the country and also the port city investments? And if it's not answered, it's okay, but I'm just share any.
So beyond port city, obviously through BRI, if you look at the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, China has invested close to about $14 billion. So obviously it's a positive that we are smack on the middle, very strategic location in that BRI strategy. Having said that, at the same time, some of these projects which was conceived way before BRI, for instance, the Hambantota port was conceptualized way before BRI. Even the port city project was initially conceptualized in early 2002 when the ADB funded Colombo South Port was being contemplated to be developed. So at that time only, this was actually a feasibility was carried out by a Singapore company. So I think being part of the BRI and project company being finally or having a stake owned by China state, which is 60% is listed in Hong Kong and Shanghai and 40% is owned by China state, obviously gave us the opportunity that since the inception of this project, as many of you know, we have gone through many cycles. Governments have come into power and governments have gone out of power for various reasons. So if it was just a private company, I'm sure this project company would have gone belly up by now. We have the balance sheet strength. Because of that, in the last 7 years, we have been having a P&L accruing cost. And to date, we have still not really start earning or deriving our top line. And we hope that with the beginning of obviously next year, because certain things are being put in place in collaboration with the Commission as well. And we have a very dynamic marketing rollout plan, and we are really ready to go out there and do a hard sell.
Thank you, Doshi. Revan, some thoughts that you can share now, been having experience in local banking and international banking arena, and also multi connections with investors and all. Now, in terms of products and services, in your thoughts, what would be sort of a look forward for most type of services? It would be the traditional, just the checkbook or the current account, but in your thoughts, what sort of financial products these big investors would be looking for with your experiences? If you can share some thoughts.
Yes, so thank you, Jeremy. Very valid question, and this is something most financial institutions coming into any new location would want to look at and consider. Just before I go there, and to touch on something what Naveen said, and given that this the forum here is bankers, Naveen mentioned that the Port City Act, right, consists of 76 sections, right? The 76 sections are split across 16 parts, right? If you look at part 8, right, part 8 in this act specifically relates to offshore banking business in the form from the area of the port city, right? So from a banker's perspective, I think everybody here should go in and look at that part, which we refer to as part 8. Out of the 76 sections, there are 11 sections in there, which I think are applicable to the banking sector. And of course, outside of that, the rest of the act, right? So I think this is something all people, all bankers should go and address this. And then that will also make them realize that this is not going to be some sort of money laundering den and drug lords, etc. Right? So to come to your question, again, this was alluded to by Naveen, right? And when you look at the reason the port city is being set up, right? The driving force or the drive behind the port city is to look at the future of finance, international trade, shipping, logistics operations, information technology, business process outsourcing, corporate headquarters, etc. Right? We're not looking at hard manufacturing. We're not looking at heavy equipment, heavy industries, etc. So the type of people coming in here are going to be a certain caliber of people, certain skill sets. One, as a banker, one needs to go in and look at to see what these people would be wanting as individuals from a retail banking perspective, right? And B, the corporations that are coming in to do these types of businesses, what would they be wanting, right? So when you look at these types of businesses, the CapEx requirement or working capital requirement, right? So one needs to look at the type of business coming in. If it is an information technology company, if it is a multinational looking to establish a regional treasury headquarters here, or establish the office here as a regional treasury headquarters, what are their requirements going to be, right? Is it a 10-year, 15-year project loan with a 5-year grace period, etc.? Unlikely, right? But would they want working capital requirements? Would they want short-term loans? Then, of course, the individuals and the staff working for these corporations, what are their requirements, right? Are they going to be looking at a credit card or a debit card? Yes, very likely. But would they be looking? Could they be also be looking at getting a loan, a home loan to buy a property in Sri Lanka within the broader zone? Would they be looking at taking a personal loan to buy a property within the port city? Yes, these are possibilities. So one needs to sort of understand the types of businesses that are coming in here, and then look at developing your product offering to ensure that it would meet the requirements of the people and the entities that are coming into the port city. So it's not, again, I'd like to allude to the fact that it is not your standard company or manufacturing or heavy machinery company that's going into the BOI, for example, or a BOI established zone, right? This is a very specialized area, and they've clearly laid out the types of businesses, the types of industries that are going to come in here.
Jeremy, just to touch one thing that on the Belt and Road point you raised,
Yes.
The preamble to the Port City Act contains something very important. It says everything should be done in the national interest. So that is the national interest of Sri Lanka. So this whole act is not something that is to be dictated or governed by any other interest of any other country. So if that has to be read with section 67, which specifically gives investor protection statutorily. So we won't have a situation where someone makes a bona fide investment, and later there is some governmental activity that puts it under threat. So in terms of going to the world, this is not an extension of China's foreign policy or something that is going to be dependent on China. Actually, the business modeling of the Chinese company that is doing it is an international concept. So I think that's a point that has to be gotten across. And from the Commission point of view, everything, this is one question: what is the benefit to Sri Lanka? That's it, nothing else, not to anybody else, not to another regime or another country. Those, it says, in the promotion of public and private economic activity in the national interest.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen, for that clarification. I think this is going to be one of the largest projects, I suppose, private and public getting together and bringing for our country, which would see our future prosperity. To sum up this session, any further thoughts individually from you gentlemen that you want to give a small message or anything that you have, any thoughts that we didn't cover up, anything from Mr. Vikram Surya, Tulsi, Revan, Naveen?
Yes, all the banks should invest in the port city and invest large sums of money there and have a presence there. That's all I have to say. Yeah, hopefully,
I think we are looking forward for that. So with the regulators allowing a more offshore banking operation, I think a lot of business opportunity would be there for funding various types of projects, and also the individuals and the salaries of which they earn, they will also have accounts of the locals and the expatriates who want to do their transactions would have to have accounts, definitely. So I suppose all the banks are looking forward for that opportunity, but the time is how much of investment and how it's going to be done over the period next couple of years. So any other thoughts from any of you gentlemen that you want to sum up before we close the session
Jeremy,
today?
may I add a couple of points, just very quick points?
Yes.
On the subject of banking, ultimately your standard revenue structure of cost of finance, non-performing loans, administration, profit, all of that stuff, the margins are going to thin. The competition is going to be fierce, margins are going to be thin. So I think you need to recognize that the service delivery level needs to be at, I think already Naveen and Revan have alluded to that, they need to be at the top of the game. That's just one thing. So I wouldn't look at it as an opportunity to increase your profits as much as it is to increase your market share. Now, on the BRI, just an interesting study that I did a couple of years ago while working with the Hambantota Port revealed something that is worth sharing. And that is when you stack up the Sri Lanka's largest trade partners, number one is India. This was a couple of years ago. Number one is India in terms of volume. Number 10 was China in terms of volume. But when you stack them up in terms of speed of growth, in other words, which ones are growing faster, China is number one and India is number 10. which means that our trade balance with India is pretty mature and flat, and our trade balance with China is heading upwards. So from that standpoint, from a trade redistribution standpoint, it's actually going back to historic times when we were a gateway between Peking and Rome. I think we can make use of being on the Belt and Road from the point of view of trade flows.
Thank you, Mr. Ikral. Anything else from Tulsi, Revan, that you want to sum up? Anything?
Yeah, if I may, I think the critical next step, I suppose, to become a successful offshore financial services center is the required regulations to be drafted. So in that process, I think this needs to be quite carefully thought through in two ways. One is that whatever the regulations which are being drafted here in Port City should be in congruence with the rest of the financial services or the systems in Sri Lanka, i.e. it should ensure that it will not have an impact on the financial system stability of rest of the country. Second point is that many foreign banks, financial institutions, before they make a call to set up in Port City, they need to be assured that they will be protected by any adverse impact of the financial systems of rest of Sri Lanka. That could include the foreign reserves issue that we are facing now, so that any foreign banks should have that protection both ways. So I guess the Commission has a huge task in front of them to make sure these regulations are progressive and also at the same time attractive. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulsi. Any sum up from Revan? Anything you want to elaborate?
Yes.
From your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think two things, and to move on from what Tulsi said, that is absolutely critical to make sure that any institution, whether it's a bank or any other entity that sets up an operation in the Port City Economic Zone, is protected from any adverse macroeconomic or fiscal issues that happen in Sri Lanka. And this is what the whole Port City Act is all about, right? It gives room, or it allows rules and regulations to be passed, right, which are specific to entities operating within the port city. So specifically from the banking perspective, I think section 44 and 45 actually clearly highlight that certain rules and regulations or laws can be passed to ensure prudent management and maintenance of confidence in the offshore banking business engaged in and from the area of authority of the Colombo Port City. That's, I'm reading directly from the Act, section 44. Right, and so that is absolutely critical.
Revan,
The next other point I would like to mention is, and I think this was brought up on the index of ease of doing business, right? Sri Lanka, I believe, in 2020 was ranked 99, right? And I think there was a one-digit move from 100, we went to 99. But if we go further back, I think going up to about 2015, right, we were about 114 and we came down to 99. And there are 190 countries, if I'm not mistaken, ranked on this. But let's go back to see why there was no move, or where there was just a one-figure move. The primary reason of a lack of improvement is that there were no regulatory changes made from a Sri Lanka perspective, right? That was clearly mentioned by the World Bank and the others in there on why there was no significant move. The passing of the Port City Act, the establishment of the Port City Commission, etc., and which will follow on with new rules and regulations, we believe is going to have a significant impact to actually improve this number and bring our ranking much higher over the coming years.
Thank you, Revan. Just one question has come on the chat forum, just to understand, like now our country rating also has been at a very low level, and also our economic conditions that we are undergoing currently are a little bit on the lower level. So how would the investors look at it? So any thoughts with your experiences, if anybody could just share a brief how they would look at these aspects, because it will be beneficial for every other business also in the country if we have more investors coming into the country. So these these factors, economic down run and the country rating, how would it have a real impact on the investors?
So if I can come in there, the international ratings are CCC rated sort of and negative outlook, right, is having a significant impact on foreign direct investments coming in. So if you're looking at, for example, the 10-year sovereign bond, right, currently trading at a yield of about nearly 18 to 20%, right? These bonds, when they were issued maybe 4 years ago, were trading at yields of like 6-7%. Right, since the COVID crisis hit in March last year, the spreads have widened and they're sitting at these levels. So when somebody is, what does this mean? When somebody is coming in to invest in Sri Lanka, right, a long-term project, they are going to expect a dollar return of nearly 20% at the minimum, because they believe that is the risk-free dollar rate in this country, right? How is this impacting the port city? Yes, all investors who are talking, we've had some initial discussions, are concerned about this, right? And again, how do we address this, right? To sort of build confidence, highlight to them the rules and regulations that are there, the various measures of protection that they can be offered by operating within the port city and economic zone. The fact that this is primarily a foreign currency denominated business, right, etc. Again, these are some of the areas that need to be addressed, right? Again, with the support of Tulsi and Czech Port City Limited and the commission coming in, right, which we try to address with the investors and make them aware of how business can operate within the port city special economic zone, and how what sort of safety guards or safety nets they can have when operating in this. A quick parallel I'd like to run is, for example, the DIFC establishment in Dubai, right? A lot of people, when they went into the UAE to operate, right, they had to give up shareholding. They couldn't be a majority shareholder. They couldn't go to court, because if you went into a UAE court, it was in Arabic, right? Immigration policies, etc., were hugely cumbersome and extremely worrying to people, because you couldn't even understand a legal term there. You were not sure of what it would be. But what did Dubai do? They took all the noise out and created the DIFC authority, the Dubai International Finance Center. They brought in rules and regulations that were structured on the back of UK law, UK rules and regulations, global policies on AML, on CFT, etc., right? Which enabled people to come in there, people who would have never, or entities who would never ever have set foot in the United Arab Emirates under the existing framework, have gone into the DIFC, right? So this is the transition, this is the transformation that we need to create within the Port City Special Economic Zone.
Thank you very much, Revan, for that elaborative explanation. We are at the final, so to wrap up the session, thank you very much, gentlemen, Naveen, Mr. Vikram Surya, Tulsi, and Revan, for joining us to share your expertise on how the port city is going to benefit our country. I'm sure in the years to come, we would see many benefits to the country if the project runs very well, and we think it should run well with the change in economic conditions to improve towards a betterment in the future and bring prosperity to our country to overcome some of the difficulties that we had. So thank you very much once again, gentlemen, for voluntarily agreeing with us to join for this session and elaborate to our membership about how the port city is going to benefit the country and give a wider understanding. And also the CPDC committee, thank you very much, especially Anjali, for making most of the arrangements, coordinating with the speakers in getting this event, and our council president and then the council members for their support extended in hosting this event. And we wish you a good night and a healthy day ahead from tomorrow. Thanks, stay safe. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Right.
Good night.